I still remember the way his voice cut through the room, sharp enough to make everyone nearby pretend they weren't listening. My boss leaned back in his chair like he owned the whole world, tapping his pen against the desk with that slow rhythm he always used whenever he wanted to make someone feel small. The fluorescent lights above us flickered for a second, and in that ugly buzzing glow he smirked and said the words that froze the air around me. "Do you really think I'm going to pay you?" For a moment, I wasn't sure if I heard him right. My brain tried to replay his voice, matching the cold tone with the ridiculous sentence. I had worked for him for months. I had stayed late, taken extra shifts, cleaned up other people's mistakes, and even covered weekends when nobody else wanted to. And now, when it was finally time for my salary, my paycheck, the man was acting like it was some kind of joke. He waited for my reaction like he was watching a comedy show. Maybe he expected me to beg. Maybe he thought I'd look down, apologize for even asking, and quietly walk away. That's how he treated most employees. And honestly, most of them let him get away with it because they were afraid of losing their job. But something about the way he said it, the way he dragged out that word pay, hit a nerve inside me. I didn't blink. I didn't move. I just watched him, and in that silence, I felt the whole story, my whole journey, leading to this exact moment. And that's where everything started. But to understand how we reached that moment, you have to know what happened before that day. Because bosses like him don't suddenly wake up one morning and decide to cheat someone. People like him build that attitude slowly, feeding it every time someone stays quiet. And people like me, well, we stay quiet too long, until one day something snaps. When I first joined the job, I actually thought I was lucky. It wasn't a big company, but it was growing fast. Everyone kept saying it was full of opportunity. The office space was small and always smelled like coffee, printer ink, and stress, but it had life. People laughed sometimes, shared lunch, exchanged stories, and pushed each other through deadlines. We were all just trying to make a living, trying to build something. But beneath that normal atmosphere, there were cracks in the system, tiny red flags I ignored because I needed the job. My boss had this talent for charming people when he wanted something, then flipping his personality the moment things didn't go his way. One second he was praising your hard work, and the next he was reminding you that you were replaceable. He enjoyed power like it was oxygen. Still I stayed. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that I could handle it. And for a while, it seemed like maybe things would improve. He gave me more tasks, trusted me with responsibilities he never gave anyone else, and even told me once that I had potential. That one word made me work even harder, thinking maybe he actually appreciated what I did. But appreciation without respect means nothing. And I learned that the hardest way. Everything changed in the last month before our confrontation. The workload increased, but the support decreased. He kept sending me assignments late at night, expecting them finished by morning. I told myself I would talk to him, but every time I tried, he brushed me off with a wave of his hand or a fake smile. Then the pay date arrived. Everyone else received their salary message. My phone stayed silent. At first I thought it was a delay. I refreshed the app again and again until my chest started to feel tight. After an hour of waiting, I finally walked into his office, hoping it was just some mistake. He didn't even look up when I entered. He kept typing on his laptop like my presence was just a background noise. I told him politely that I hadn't received my salary yet. He didn't respond. I repeated it. He stopped typing, leaned back, and gave me that look, the one he uses when he thinks someone is wasting his time. And that's when he asked the question, "Do you really think I'm going to pay you?" At first, the room felt completely still, like even the air was waiting for what would happen next. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and steady. I felt anger rising, but not the loud, explosive kind. This was a quiet anger, the kind that comes after months of swallowing your words. He laughed, a short, careless laugh that made the situation even more unreal. "You should be grateful you have this job," he said, waving his hand like he was doing me a favor. "I've given you experience. That's worth more than money. Experience. Worth more than money." I almost wanted to laugh with him because of how absurd it sounded. My rent wasn't paid with experience. My bills didn't disappear because I had potential. The food in my fridge didn't appear magically because someone thought I was learning a lot. For a second, all the memories of late nights, extra hours, and sacrificed weekends flashed in my mind. All the times I pushed myself because he said I was valuable, only to find out that valuable to him meant free labor. He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was sharing a secret. "You're not getting paid, so either accept that, or you can leave. Plenty of people want your position." There it was, the truth. He never valued me. He never respected me. He just needed someone who worked hard without asking questions. And now that I was finally asking one, he didn't want to pay for what he took from me. I felt something shift inside me, a calmness I had never felt in front of him before. Maybe he didn't notice it yet, but something in the room had already changed. He expected fear, but what he got was something else. I responded in a way no one expected. And in that moment, everything that happened after, all of it, started with that single response. But what I told him, how I turned the whole situation around, and how that one decision changed everything, that's where the real story begins. And trust me, you're not going to forget. I didn't answer him right away. I just stood there, staring at the man who thought he could decide my worth with a single sentence. Maybe he thought the silence meant I was scared. Maybe he thought I was about to apologize or pretend I misunderstood him. But inside, I wasn't thinking about fear anymore. I was thinking about every moment that had led me to this point and how blind I had been to the signs. Because the truth was, this wasn't the first time something fell off. It wasn't even the second. Looking back now, the warnings were everywhere, but I only saw them clearly after that moment in his office. And if I'm being honest, part of me didn't want to see them back then. When you really need a job, you ignore things you shouldn't ignore. You convince yourself that you're overthinking, that everybody goes through tough workplaces, that hustling is just part of life. But when someone looks you in the eyes and tells you they won't pay you, suddenly all those excuses you built for them crumble. So before I responded to him, my mind drifted back to the day I joined this place. I still remember walking into the office on my first day, nervous but excited. The walls were white, but not the clean, modern kind, more like the kind that needed a fresh coat of paint. There were mismatched desks, a printer that made strange noises, and cables running across the floor like they had minds of their own. Still, the energy felt hopeful. Everyone looked busy, focused, and determined. I thought I had finally found a chance to grow, to build a stable path forward. The first person I met was Sarah. She had been there for 2 years and knew everything, from how to fix the glitchy clock-in system to which drawers were safe to open without finding abandoned snacks from last summer. She smiled at me like she had been waiting for someone new to talk to. And for a while, she became the only reason the place didn't feel completely overwhelming. But even she had warned me softly, in her own careful way, about the boss. "He can be unpredictable," she told me once, choosing her words like she was handling something fragile. "Just keep your head down. Do your work. Don't expect too much." I laughed back then, thinking she was exaggerating. The boss seemed strict, yes, but he also had moments when he seemed considerate. Sometimes he'd bring coffee for the team. Sometimes he'd share stories about when he started the company. Sometimes he'd tell us how proud he was. But it didn't take long to see the other side, the side Sarah didn't want to describe directly. It appeared in small flashes, like the day a coworker accidentally saved a file in the wrong format and the boss raised his voice just loud enough for the whole office to fall silent. Or the day someone asked him if they could leave early for a family emergency, and he told them, "Your personal problems shouldn't interfere with work." Then there were the days he disappeared completely, leaving us with piles of tasks and vague instructions. And when things went wrong, he always found a way to blame someone else. Usually the person who couldn't defend themselves. Still, I worked hard. I thought if I just proved myself, things would get better. And to some extent, it did feel like he recognized my efforts, until I realized he wasn't recognizing them for the right reasons. The more capable I became, the more he loaded on me. At first, I felt proud. Then I felt overwhelmed. And finally, I felt used. But by the time I understood what was happening, I was already buried under responsibilities no one else wanted. And the last month, that was the real warning. One evening, I stayed late finishing a report he said was extremely urgent. I ended up sending it at midnight. The next morning, when I dragged myself into the office, he didn't even acknowledge it. But he did hand me another pile of tasks. I asked him politely if someone else could take one of them since the deadlines were tight. He just said, "You're the only one I trust to do things properly." It sounded like a compliment, but the tone felt wrong. It was the kind of compliment someone gives when they want you to do everything without questioning. And somehow I still pushed through. I told myself that work was work, that effort would be rewarded, that maybe he was stressed, and maybe I was reading too much into things. But the moment he told me he wouldn't pay me, every memory twisted into its real shape. Suddenly, I could see it all clearly. The empty praise, the forced loyalty, the constant pressure, the way he convinced people they owed him more than he owed them. And the strange thing was, in the days before salary day, he had been acting almost too nice. Asking me to stay just a little longer, promising things would make sense soon, telling me we had a big project coming and he wanted me to be part of it. Now I realized he was just trying to squeeze out as much work as possible before dropping the truth. But the most unsettling part wasn't even what he said. It was how normal he looked saying it. No guilt, no shame, no hesitation. Like refusing to pay someone was as casual as telling them to switch off a light. I took a slow breath in his office as all these thoughts ran through my head. He watched me with that same smirk, like he was waiting for the moment I finally broke. But I didn't break. I felt something stronger than fear, clarity. I remembered Sarah's warning. I remembered the coworker who left suddenly without explanation. I remembered the nervous looks people exchanged whenever the boss was in a bad mood. I remembered the times people got blamed for things they didn't do. And I remembered how everyone whispered about delayed payments but never said it openly. It all made sense now. He didn't think I would speak up. He didn't think I had the courage to fight back. He didn't think I had any power. But he was wrong. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel scared of losing the job. I didn't feel pressured to be polite. I felt something he didn't expect, control. And the moment I opened my mouth to respond, something shifted in the air. He sensed it. I sensed it. And even though no one else was in the room, it felt like the entire office could feel something was about to change. I responded in a way no one expected. But what I said, and what happened after, is a story that takes everything to the next level. And the consequences didn't just affect me, they shook the entire workplace. But that part, that comes next. The words were already forming in my mind, but before they even left my mouth, something unusual happened. My boss leaned forward, elbows on the desk, watching me like he was waiting to enjoy the moment I finally surrendered. He had done this before, maybe not with me, but with others. It was the same posture, the same expression, the same habit of staring someone down until they backed away. He expected me to get nervous. He expected me to lower my eyes. He expected me to accept his decision because, in his mind, he was untouchable. But the room felt different now. The tension wasn't just sitting between us. It was pushing outward, crawling into the corners of the office, slipping under the door, and spreading into the hall outside. Even though nobody else could hear what was being said, it felt like the building itself was listening. I finally spoke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sound angry. I just spoke clearly, calm, steady, and unexpectedly confident. And whatever I said, it was enough to make him blink, just once, almost like he hadn't prepared for the possibility that I would speak to him like an equal. His smirk disappeared for a second before he recovered it, but that tiny shift told me everything. He wasn't as confident as he pretended to be. And that's when the real conflict between us began. After I left the office, the whole atmosphere in the building felt heavier. People noticed the tension, even without knowing what happened. Sarah looked at me from across the room as soon as I stepped out. Her eyes asked dozens of questions she couldn't say out loud in front of everyone. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, but my mind was racing. I kept replaying the conversation. Not just his words, but the tone he used, the way he leaned forward, the way he wanted to make me feel powerless. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about control. And by answering him the way I did, I broke a rule he wasn't expecting anyone to break. For the rest of the day, he kept calling different employees into his office. One by one, they went in and came out looking uneasy. Nobody said anything, but you could feel something shifting, like everyone sensed a storm coming but didn't know where it was coming from. Later, during lunch, Sarah pulled me aside. She kept her voice low, like she didn't want the walls to hear. "What happened?" she whispered. Your face, his face, something is wrong. I told her part of the truth, but not everything. I said the salary issue wasn't sorted yet. She frowned, the kind of frown that comes from experience, not confusion. You're not the first, she said quietly. But you might be the first one he didn't scare into silence. That sentence stayed with me, because it meant I was stepping into something bigger, something that had been happening long before I joined. Suddenly, the whispers I used to hear made sense. The coworkers who left without warning. The random tension. The side conversations that stopped the moment the boss walked near. This wasn't just my conflict, it was a pattern. A dangerous one. Over the next few days, things only got stranger. My tasks were changed without warning. Documents I had completed disappeared from the share drive. Emails I never saw were suddenly mentioned. It was like someone was trying to build a case against me, one missing file at a time. It didn't take long to realize who was behind it. He was trying to make me look unreliable. And he was doing it quietly, professionally, in a way that couldn't be traced back to him easily. That's what made it so unsettling. And that's when a new thought entered my mind. If he had done this before, how many people had he pushed out using the same tactics? The subplots around me started becoming clearer too. There was Arif, one of the senior employees who had been unusually silent lately. He was normally cheerful, but now he avoided the boss's office like it was dangerous. And whenever I passed by him, he looked at me with a strange mix of sympathy and warning, like he knew exactly what war I had stepped into. There was also Fatima from accounts, who kept double-checking receipts and salary sheets with a nervous expression. Every time she opened her system, she glanced toward the boss's door. I didn't know her well, but something in her eyes said she was carrying secrets she couldn't share. And then there was a newcomer, a quiet intern who worked at the desk 2 rows away from me. He watched everything. Not in a suspicious way. More like he was observing a drama unfold, unsure which side to stand on. Sometimes I caught him staring at me, not with judgment, but with curiosity, like he was waiting to see how far I would go. Meanwhile, the boss behaved like everything was normal. He even smiled more than usual, which made things feel even more eerie. The kinder he acted on the outside, the more I could feel the tension building underneath. It reminded me of a calm sea right before a storm, quiet, still and dangerous. Every day that passed, the conflict grew deeper. It wasn't just about unpaid salary anymore. It was about integrity, respect, and the truth behind the company's facade. And part of me started to wonder if exposing him would put me in danger, not physically, but financially and professionally. He had influence. He had connections. He had a reputation built on carefully crafted appearances. And someone like that wouldn't let a single employee ruin everything. But as the tension grew, something else started happening too. People who never talked much started glancing in my direction. Some even approached me quietly, asking simple questions like, "Are you okay?" Or, "Did something happen?" It was like they were waiting for someone to finally speak up, waiting for someone to do what they couldn't. And that's when I understood something important. This conflict wasn't just mine anymore. If I backed down, the cycle would continue. If I stayed quiet, he would keep doing the same thing to others. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about getting paid. It was about changing something that had been wrong for a long time. But knowing that didn't make the situation easier. Because every step I took toward exposing him, he took 2 steps toward protecting himself. And there were moments when I wondered whether I was in over my head. Whether this battle was too big for just one person. Whether confronting a boss with this much manipulation was a mistake. But the moment I replayed his words, "Do you really think I'm going to pay you?" any doubt I felt disappeared. I knew I had to keep going, even if it meant everything was about to get much more intense. And the truth is, the real twist in this story wasn't even close to happening yet. But it was coming, and none of us in that office were prepared for what would happen next. The days that followed felt heavier than anything I had expected. It was like the walls of the office were slowly closing in, 1 inch at a time. Everyone sensed the rising tension, even if they didn't know the details. And somehow, I could feel eyes on me almost everywhere I went, sometimes out of curiosity, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of silent support. But what made everything worse was that the boss had become unusually calm. Too calm. He walked around the office with a relaxed smile, greeting people, asking about their work, pretending everything was perfectly normal. It was the kind of calm that hides something underneath, like a quiet ocean hiding the biggest wave. And every time our eyes met, his smile tightened just a little bit, like he was reminding me he was in control. But he wasn't. Not anymore. Because something unexpected had started happening on my side, too. People slowly began opening up. It started with small conversations, whispers near the pantry, hushed voices near the file cabinets, subtle glances exchanged at the printer. Everyone had a story, a complaint, or an experience they had buried because they were too scared to say it out loud. Late salaries, unpaid overtime, verbal pressure, manipulative promises, all the things that seemed small alone but made a pattern when put together. And the more I listened, the more I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every quiet voice that never got a chance to speak. Still, just when I thought I understood the full picture, something happened that shifted everything. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was dull and gray, as if the weather itself knew trouble was coming. I was finishing a report when Fatima from accounts walked toward me, her hand shaking slightly. She sat next to me without making eye contact, pretending she was just asking about numbers. Then in a whisper barely louder than a breath, she said, "Check your file folder, the shared one now." I didn't know what she meant, but I nodded gently. She stood up and walked away quickly, as if she was afraid someone had seen her talk to me. My heart started to pound. I opened the shared folder. At first, it looked normal. Same layout, same document names. But when I clicked one of the project files I had worked on weeks ago, my stomach dropped. Pages were missing. My name was removed. And the last modified date was from that morning. Someone had tampered with it. I checked another file. Same thing. Then another. And another. 4 of my major tasks I had stayed late to finish, were altered so it looked like I had done nothing. It was as if someone was rewriting my entire contribution. My hands felt cold as realization hit me. He wasn't just trying to intimidate me anymore. He was trying to erase me. If these documents were used in any performance review or official meeting, it would look like I hadn't done my job. It would look like he had reasons not to pay me. It would look like I wasn't reliable. And if I complained, he could easily say I was lying. This wasn't a conflict anymore. This was a setup. I glanced toward his office. The door was open just a little, just enough for him to watch the room without looking obvious. And for a brief moment, I caught him looking right at me. Not smiling, not angry, just observing, like he was waiting to see how long I would last before breaking. I felt my pulse in my throat. The room felt too warm. But at the same time, something inside me grew stronger. Fear was still there, but now it sat beside something else, determination. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to play safe anymore. The next day, I arrived earlier than usual. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear the hum of the lights and the clicking of the old air conditioner. As I sat at my desk, I tried to think through everything. There were risks, big ones, but staying silent meant losing more than a paycheck. It meant losing my dignity. Just when I started gathering proof of the altered files, Arif approached me. His face looked more serious than I had ever seen it. He didn't sit. He didn't even ask if he could talk. He just whispered urgently, "He knows you're fighting back?" My chest tightened. "How?" "He has access to everything," Arif said softly. "And he's been collecting things about you." I felt a chill run down my arms. "What kind of things?" I asked. Arif hesitated, his eyes shifting toward the boss's office. "Emails, tasks, deadlines, anything he can twist. He's trying to build a story." That word, story, hit harder than I expected, because that's exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just changing documents. He was creating a narrative where I was the problem. And if he succeeded, no one would believe me. They would see him as the responsible boss and me as the difficult employee. It was classic manipulation, but on a much bigger level than I had thought. Just as Arif walked away, the boss stepped out of his office. His expression was unreadable. Calm, controlled, almost rehearsed. He scanned the room slowly, his gaze landing on each person, as if he was checking their loyalty one by one. Then his eyes locked onto mine. He raised an eyebrow, subtle but sharp, a silent challenge. And in that moment, I knew something important. He was preparing for something. Something big. Something that would change everything. The entire day was filled with strange energy. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Documents were shuffled. People walked quicker than usual. The boss made calls in a lowered voice, pacing back and forth like he was setting pieces on a chessboard. And I could feel it building. Every second, every whisper, every glance. Something was coming. Something he had planned. Something that would force everything to explode into the climax. By late afternoon, when everyone was finishing their tasks, the boss finally called out my name. His tone was calm but carried a weight that made everyone pause mid-step. "Come to my office," he said. No emotion. No explanation. Just a command. My heart pounded. Every eye in the room followed me as I walked toward his door. The hallway felt longer than usual. The air felt heavier. Even the ticking clock on the wall sounded louder. I reached the door. He stood inside, waiting. The tension was so thick it felt like the moment before lightning strikes. Whatever he was about to say, whatever he had prepared, whatever trap or confrontation he had planned, it was the turning point, the moment everything would ignite. But what happened when I stepped into that office, what he revealed, what he accused, and what I discovered, was something no one in that building was ready for. And it pushed the story straight to the edge of its most explosive point. The moment I stepped into his office, the door slid shut behind me with a soft click that sounded far too loud in the tense silence. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood near the window with his back to me, hands clasped behind him like he was preparing for some dramatic reveal. And for a few seconds, he didn't say a word. The quiet stretched long enough for my heartbeat to become the only thing I could hear. Then he finally turned around. His expression was unreadable, which made it worse. Usually, he showed some hint of what he was thinking. Annoyance, frustration, superiority. But now his face was blank. Calm. Almost too calm. "You've been busy," he said, tapping a folder on his desk. I didn't respond. I didn't trust my voice yet. He motioned toward the chair in front of him. "Sit." I didn't move. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push it. Instead, he opened the folder slowly, like he wanted me to feel every second that passed. "I've been reviewing your performance," he said, flipping through the pages. "Your work has been interesting." The way he said interesting made my stomach tighten. He pulled out a printed sheet, slid it across the desk, and nodded for me to look. When I finally did, my blood ran cold. It was an email, supposedly from me. An email I never wrote. In it, I was complaining about coworkers, blaming others for tasks I apparently failed to complete, and even suggesting that I deserved special treatment. The language was casual, rude, nothing like how I communicated. But the really shocking part, it was time-stamped and sent from my account. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to understand, trying to breathe. But the more I read, the more it became obvious. Someone had accessed my email. Someone had forged messages. Someone had planted them as evidence. Someone had set a trap long before I realized a battle had even begun. He watched my reaction with quiet satisfaction. "This kind of attitude," he said softly, "has no place here." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind was racing through possible explanations. Who had access? Who had the ability? Was it him? Was it someone he pressured? Someone he bribed? Someone he threatened? The thought made my skin crawl. "You're lying," I finally said, but even I could hear how shaken my voice was. He shrugged. "The system doesn't lie." That sentence hit harder than anything he'd said before. Because he wasn't just manipulating words or documents anymore. He was manipulating reality. Twisting facts into a narrative he could use against me. But just as I felt panic rising, something else happened. A soft knock on the door. We both turned. He frowned, annoyed by the interruption, and walked over to open it. Standing there was the intern, the quiet one. His face was pale, and he looked more nervous than I had ever seen him. But behind the nervousness, there was something else. Something urgent. I need to tell you something, the intern said in a shaky voice. The boss's tone hardened instantly. This is not the time. But the intern didn't step back. His hands were trembling, but he didn't move. It's important. The boss's jaw tightened. We'll talk later. No, the intern said quietly. We need to talk now. A dangerous pause followed. I could feel the tension crackling in the air like static. The boss stepped out into the hallway, probably thinking he could intimidate the intern into silence. But the door didn't close fully. A small gap remained, letting their voices slip through. What do you think you're doing? The boss hissed. You told me to delete those files, the intern whispered back. You said no one would know. My heart stopped. Files? What files? You said you'd protect me, the intern continued. But now everyone's asking questions, and I can't take the blame. The boss lowered his voice even more, but I could still catch pieces. Keep your mouth shut. You signed confidentiality. Do you know what could happen to you? The intern's reply was trembling but brave. I'm not covering for you anymore. A chill rushed down my spine. This was the plot twist no one saw coming. The intern wasn't just a quiet observer. He wasn't just a background character in this chaos. He had been involved, pulled in, used, manipulated, and now he was the weakest link in the boss's plan ready to break. Suddenly, the boss's voice sharply. If you say a single thing to anyone. The intern stepped back. I already told someone. The boss froze. I felt my breath catch. Told who? For a full second, the entire hallway fell silent. Then the intern's voice came through, small but steady. I told someone about the files you deleted, and the emails, and the account's access. He hesitated. I told Fatima. Everything inside me stilled. Fatima, the one who warned me. The one who kept glancing at her screen like she was guarding secrets. The one who looked terrified every time the boss walked by. She knew. She knew everything. And the intern had just confirmed the one thing the boss didn't want anyone to confirm. His actions weren't accidental. They weren't misunderstandings. They weren't mistakes. They were deliberate, calculated, planned. The boss stepped back into his office slowly, his face drained of color for the first time since I'd known him. His breathing was uneven, but he was trying to hide it. When he looked at me, something in his expression had changed. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was fear. And that fear told me two things. First, the situation was far worse than I imagined. Second, something big was about to happen, bigger than anything any of us were prepared for. He tried to compose himself, but the cracks were showing. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, Fatima appeared in the doorway. Her expression was firm, almost unrecognizable from the quiet accountant she usually was. We need to talk, she said. The boss swallowed hard. Not now. Yes, she said, stepping inside. Now. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady, and what she said next raised the stakes higher than anything so far. I found something in the system. And it's not just about him, she said, pointing at me. The boss's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Fatima took a deep breath. It's about the company. The air went still. About what you've been hiding from all of us. My heart pounded as her words sank in. This wasn't just a personal conflict anymore. This was bigger. Much bigger. And whatever she found, whatever she was about to reveal, it was the second twist that would change everything in the story. But the truth she discovered, the one she was just about to expose, was more explosive than any of us could have imagined. The moment I stepped into that office again, my heartbeat echoed louder than the ticking clock on the wall. Everything that I'd been building, every lie, every threat, every moment of doubt, felt like it was buzzing beneath my skin. And when Mr. Hale stood from behind his desk, pushing his chair back slowly, I knew we were finally at the point where everything would either collapse or come to light. The room felt smaller than ever, like it was shrinking around the truth we had all been avoiding. His eyes were colder than before, but this time, there was something else hiding behind them. Not confidence, not power, something closer to fear. I didn't sit. I didn't look away. I needed him to see that the person standing in front of him wasn't the same quiet employee he thought he could push around. I was done being intimidated, done being manipulated, done questioning myself. The evidence I had gathered, the statements from coworkers, the trail of financial documents, everything was ready. But he didn't know that yet, and I wasn't sure how he would react when he realized everything he had tried so hard to hide was finally exposed. "You shouldn't have come back," he said quietly. His voice didn't shake, but something in it sounded strained. Forced. I knew it wasn't confidence holding him together, it was panic. The kind people feel right before their whole world collapses. "I didn't come back for you," I replied. "I came back for the truth." For a split second, he looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand how I had pieced everything together. But then his expression changed. He straightened his posture, adjusted his sleeves, and gave a slow, mocking smile. "You think you know something," he said, "but you don't know what you're getting into." He wasn't threatening me anymore. He was warning me, and that almost scared me more. Almost. Before I could respond, the door opened. And that's when the real twist revealed itself. It wasn't a security guard. It wasn't a coworker. It was someone I never expected to see again. Someone who disappeared weeks ago after promising to help me. Someone I thought had given up or run away. Mira stepped inside, her posture firm, her face set with determination. And she wasn't alone. Behind her stood someone from the board of directors, holding a thin stack of printed papers and a very serious expression. Mr. Hale froze. "Mira!" he whispered, disbelief twisting his voice. "You should sit down," she told him. "We're doing this properly." My breath caught. For the first time since this chaos began, I felt the tension in the room shift. It didn't disappear, not yet, but it tilted in my favor. And for a moment I couldn't move. All I could do was watch as the person who once told me she was too scared to stand up against him now stepped forward like she wasn't afraid of anything anymore. "Mira," I said quietly, "you found it?" She nodded. Everything. Every missing file. Every transfer. Every message they tried to delete. The board member placed the documents on the table, each page a piece of the truth Mr. Hale thought he had buried. And when he finally spoke again, there was no arrogance left in him. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "You already know the answer," she said. The room grew heavier. The buzz of the fluorescent lights seemed louder than before. Even my own breathing felt too noisy. This was the moment everything had been leading up to, the climax that had been waiting behind every twist. And yet, a strange part of me felt like we were still just at the edge of something larger, something darker. The board member cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale," he said, "we need to discuss your conduct, the financial discrepancies, and the complaints that have been filed." For the first time, my boss, the man who told me to my face that he wouldn't pay me, looked small. Human. Like the walls he built around himself were suddenly made of glass. But right when I thought everything was finally falling into place, reality shifted again. Because Mr. Hale didn't argue. He didn't deny anything. He didn't raise his voice or try to turn the blame on someone else. He simply stepped back, let out a slow breath, and said, "It wasn't just me." Those 4 words hit harder than any threat he had ever made. Mira and I exchanged a look. The board member asked, "What do you mean?" And then, with a strange calmness, almost relief, Mr. Hale pointed toward the door. "You might want to talk to the person who made all of this possible." The board member frowned. "Who are you talking about?" He didn't answer. Instead, the door opened again. Footsteps, a shadow stretching across the floor, and then a familiar voice said, "I was wondering when you'd finally figure it out." My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. Everyone in the room did. And the twist I thought would never come, the one I wasn't prepared for, the one that changed everything even in the moment of victory, walked in wearing a calm smile. This wasn't the end of the story. Not yet, because the real mastermind had just entered the room. And everything we thought we understood was suddenly wrong. The moment that familiar voice filled the room, everything inside me went still. I turned slowly, hoping I was wrong, hoping my mind was just playing tricks on me after everything we'd been through. But no, the person who stepped forward was the last person I ever expected to be connected to this mess. It was Daniel, the company's quiet financial analyst, The guy who always kept his head down and rarely spoke unless someone asked him a direct question. He was the one people trusted, the one everyone assumed had no interest in company politics. But the expression on his face now told a completely different story. It wasn't shy or nervous. It was confident, controlled, almost proud. He walked in like he owned the place, hands in his pockets, calm as if he had just stepped out for a coffee break. But Mira and I both felt the energy shift instantly. Even Mr. Hale looked like he had been waiting for this moment, like he finally had someone to point to and say, "See? It wasn't just me." Daniel took his time looking around the room, and when his eyes finally landed on me, he gave a small nod, almost like he was acknowledging me for figuring things out. The board member cleared his throat, clearly confused but trying to stay composed. "Daniel," he said, "what exactly is your involvement in all of this?" Daniel smiled, and it wasn't the friendly, harmless smile we were all used to seeing from him. This one had sharp edges. "More than you think," he replied. "But let me guess, you came here expecting a simple story. One villain, one problem, one neat little ending." I felt anger rise in my chest, but also confusion. This wasn't making sense. Daniel wasn't someone who ever seemed interested in power or control. So why would he be involved in something so risky? Why? I finally asked. It was the only question that mattered. He turned toward me with a look that almost resembled disappointment. "Because," he said slowly, "people like you never see what's happening around them. You think corruption is loud and obvious, but sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like a helpful coworker who offers to cover your shift or fix a spreadsheet. Sometimes it's someone you don't even consider capable." The board member took a step forward. "Daniel, this is serious. We have documented proof of financial misconduct." "That's the thing," Daniel said softly. "You have proof of his misconduct. But everything he did? It started with something I set up. Small things at first. Numbers that didn't match. Files that conveniently disappeared. Transfers that could be pinned on someone else. By the time he realized what was happening, he was already in too deep." Mr. Hale clenched his jaw, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw guilt in his eyes. Not because he was innocent, but because he realized he had been manipulated too. "You used me," he whispered. Daniel shrugged like it was nothing. "You made it easy." The tension in the room settled into something heavy and final. The board member quietly stepped aside and made a call, his voice low but urgent. Mira remained frozen next to me, processing everything just as quickly as I was. All the nights we stayed awake gathering evidence, all the trouble we went through trying to understand how the company had fallen apart, all of it connected back to someone we never suspected. The mastermind wasn't the loud one. It was the quiet one. Security arrived within minutes. Daniel didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't even look surprised. He simply allowed them to take him, as though this was just another step in a plan he had already prepared for. Mr. Hale, on the other hand, looked broken. All the pride and arrogance that once defined him had faded. As he watched Daniel being escorted out, he turned toward me, and for the first time, the wall between us felt thin. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said quietly, "but you deserve better. All of you did." I nodded, not because I forgave him, but because the truth had finally come out. The lies, the unpaid wages, the threats, the manipulation, it all had a source. And now that the source was exposed, the company could finally breathe again. The next few days felt unreal. Reports were filed, investigations continued, and statements were gathered. The board suspended Mr. Hale pending full review, but even he seemed relieved. Without Daniel's influence, he didn't have anything left to hide behind. He faced the consequences with a strange kind of resignation, like he knew this was the only way forward. As for me, I didn't expect to stay with the company after everything that happened. But something surprising happened instead. The board reached out to me, not with threats or warnings, but with an offer. They wanted me to stay. They wanted Mira to stay too. They wanted people they could trust. People who wouldn't look away. It took me a while to decide. Part of me wanted to leave the whole place behind and never look back. But another part of me remembered why I started this journey in the first place. I wanted the truth. I wanted things to be fair. I wanted people to be treated with respect. In the end, I said yes. The company changed slowly, but it changed. Pay became fair. Workloads became reasonable. Complaints were taken seriously. And the key word that mattered most, transparency, became a part of everyday culture. One afternoon, weeks later, I stood by the office window, watching the sunset paint the sky with soft colors. Mira walked over with 2 cups of tea, setting one beside me. "Feels different now," she said. "In a good way," I replied. She nodded. "You know, when you first stood up to him, I didn't think it would lead this far." "Neither did I." We both laughed softly, a kind of relieved laughter that only comes after surviving something complicated and heavy. Then she added, "But you did the right thing. Always remember that." I looked out the window again, feeling the weight lift fully for the first time. The story that started with a simple question, "Do you really think I'm going to pay you?" had led to a journey none of us expected. A journey that exposed truth, revealed hidden intentions, and reminded us that even in the quietest corners, corruption can grow if no one pays attention. But the most important part was this: you never know how strong you are until someone tries to take away what you've earned. As the light faded and the office settled into calm silence, I realized something. The ending wasn't just about justice or winning. It was about understanding your worth. It was about speaking up when things feel wrong. It was about not letting fear silence you. And maybe it was about trusting that even in messy, complicated situations, the truth finds its way out. In the end, everything came full circle. I got my closure. Mira got her courage. The company got its fresh start. And Daniel, well, he got what he deserved. The story ended, not with revenge, not with bitterness, but with clarity, strength, and a reminder that standing up for yourself can change more than your own life. It can change everything around you.